Hello, friends and fellow positive change makers out there. My name is Kara Cooper, and I am the Kentucky organizer with the Student Environmental Action Coalition. And today I'm going to talk to you all about how to plan a winning campaign. And I think it's important for us to remember that a winning campaign also helps to grow a sustainable organization. So first, let's talk a little bit about why campaigns. Why not something else? Why not education is something that I hear a lot. Well, the reason why I'm a proponent of using campaigns to make positive change in my community is that there are a lot of things that need to be systemically changed. And just asking isn't always enough. A campaign allows you to build and shift power. And education is important, but it won't make change happen on its own. A lot of times I hear folks who are really interested in educating their peers, educating their friends. And education is a really important first step, but education alone is not going to make the difference that we need to see happen in our communities. So I want to tell you a little bit of a story that will help sort of paint this picture as to why education's not alone. And so this is a pretty common example that you'll see in a lot of different campaign planning trainings. And this is about a puppy factory. And so as you can see, there's a puppy factory upriver. And the puppy factory, every day, it's just putting out more and more puppies into the river. And so one day you're taking a walk by the river and you notice that there are puppies in the river. And you get really upset because, the puppies are in the river and you want to help save them. So you go over to the river and you start pulling out puppies. And you're pulling out puppies, but they just keep coming and you can't get them all out. So you go back to your town and you start talking to people. Start telling them about the puppies in the river. You start educating your friends, your peers, and your neighbors about this problem that's happening. And you round up a whole bunch of people and you go down to the river with them because now they know about the puppies and they want to help. And so you all start pulling out puppies. And you're pulling out puppies and you're pulling out puppies all day. And the puppies, they just keep coming. And your friends get tired and they have to go home. But the puppies keep coming. And, the moral of the story is that in order to get the puppies to stop coming in the river, you actually have to go upstream to the puppy factory. And you need to, figure out a way to make it so the puppy factory is not allowed to continue to dump the puppies into the river. You need to be able to change the problem at the source. And so that's why campaigns are really helpful, because by educating your friends and your family and your coworkers and your neighbors to be excited about an issue or interested in an issue, and then mobilizing them to help out, to make a change at the source, to make a lasting change, a systemic change that will actually fix the problem. So if we're going to understand about campaigns, the first thing we need to talk about is power. And we need to talk about who has power and what kind of power that we have. So first off, power, the definition of power is the ability to do something. And so you want to talk about and think about who has power. Well, the first people that come to mind are maybe politicians or your school president, or maybe you think about really rich people like the Koch brothers. Money is definitely one form of power. And a lot of times we think about people who are in these high-level positions, like state representatives or governors or CEOs as the people that have power. But actually, we all have power, right? And what kind of power do we individually have? Well, we all have a little bit of power, and it's people power. And so to build power and to start working on a campaign, you really need to build up this people power. And as you can see from this illustration, While we might think that, our state representative has a lot of power individually, if we get enough people together, we can tip the scale in our favor. So when you're thinking about starting a campaign, you want to look at the relationship that you and your allies have in comparison to maybe the decision maker in your campaign. And you want to think about an area that you can power over them and win. And these relationships don't always have to be antagonistic. Having a relationship with an administrator or a local legislator is an empowering thing. So that's something to keep in mind as well. So once you have an understanding about power, and you've sort of taken an inventory about what sort of power you have, and what sort of power maybe the person that you're up against has, the next step is to define your goals. And a goal is your definition of a victory, and you want to make it as specific as you can because you want to make sure that you know when you've accomplished it. And so the best goals are SMART goals, which means they're specific, they're measurable, they're attainable, they're realistic, and they're time-bound. You want to make sure that your goal is not something that's super easy for you to get. You want to make sure that it's something that helps you to build power, and it's slightly, out of your reach, but it's still attainable. It's a stretch, but it's not completely out of your reach. You also want to think about benchmark goals, and so these are sort of like smaller goals that are nested into your larger goal that help you make sure you're moving towards that final victory. And you also want to think about the range of impact of your goals. Different goals might have an impact level at the community level, but they also have a larger impact at the societal level as well, and that makes a good goal. And as you can see from this next slide, winning is great, but how you win is important. In order for us to set ourselves up for long-term success, our campaign needs to achieve concrete improvements. It needs to give people a sense of their own power, and it needs to change the relations of power in society. And so you might have a really cool campaign idea, but the way to go about getting that campaign to a victory should be something that helps you build power. It also should be something that helps other folks realize that they have their own power and they have a sense of that own power. For example, I might be working on a sustainable investments campaign on my campus, and I might have a plan or a strategy of achieving these concrete improvements of switching our investments away from fossil fuel industries and into sustainable technologies. Now, there are different ways you can go about doing this. One way would be to set up a meeting with your university president, maybe some meetings with your board of trustees or the decision makers who would be able to control the investments at your university. And maybe I take one or two people along with me to these meetings. Well, I might be able to convince these administrators that sustainable investments is a good idea for our university, because it is. And that might achieve concrete improvement, which meets the first step of these three things that a good campaign should have. But it doesn't really give people a sense of their own power, and it definitely doesn't really change the relationship of power in society. Now, I might go about this same exact campaign in a different way in order to do all three of these things. I might, first start by building a really large organization of people who want to work on this issue and having a lot of conversations about what the best way for us to show our administration that the students care about this issue. Maybe we do a survey that helps bring in even more people from the student body. Maybe we collect petitions to show the overwhelming student support for the issue, and we take those to the administrators and those to the board of trustees. Maybe our campaign plan involves getting media coverage and showing that, sustainable investments is something that students are pushing for. And then when we have that victory and we achieve that concrete improvement because we've convinced our administrators, it hasn't been done, as a backroom deal or in one-on-one conversations between me and the university president, but it's brought in a lot more people, and it's shown that when a large group of people care about an issue, they can win positive changes, concrete improvements in their community. And it helps show that students have power over administrators. Cool. So after we've got our goals set, you need to identify your allies and your targets, or your decision makers. And allies are just people or organizations that are on your side. And when you're thinking about allies and who might be an ally, you want to think through these 3 questions. First off, whose problem is it that you're working to address? The second question is, what would they get out of it? What do they risk? And so what does this person or organization get as a benefit of being a part of your coalition, working on this particular issue? And the third question is, how can they help? What is it that they have or that they can bring to the table, or that they can add to your campaign by joining in? And then when you're thinking about targets, target is just the person or people who have the power to make the change that you seek. And target is sort of a violent word, and so I like to try to use the word decision maker, because essentially this is the person who can make the decision that needs to happen in order for you to have a campaign victory. The next step is to do your research. And this is a picture of a power map. And a power map is a pretty cool tool for figuring out a little bit about your decision maker and what sort of influence you can have on them. And so I would definitely say that doing a power map is something that you're going to want to do during your research phase. And basically you just put your decision maker in the center here, and then you see who has influence over that decision maker. For example, if we're talking about our campus president, our university president, maybe their spouse has some influence over them, maybe the board of trustees or the student government association. And then you see how you can sort of influence that group of people or individuals that can influence your decision maker. For example, if you say that the student government has power to influence your decision maker, well, then you also can think about, well, who do I know on student government? Maybe you have class with someone who's on student government. Maybe your best friend is dating the student government president. And so this is a really cool tool, and we can talk more about this in a future webinar. But you want to just do as much research as you can about what the decision-making process is, who might want to be your allies, who might be your opponents, what are you up against. The next important step in a strategic campaign plan is to build your base. So now you've got an idea of an issue that you want to work on. You've set a goal. You've done some research. You've sort of identified who's on your side, who might be your opponents, who's your decision maker. This build your base step is the next step in starting to build that people power that we need to shift the scales in our favor. And a base is just a group of people that you can count on for campaign support and to take action with you. Once you have a goal and a decision maker in mind, you can start spreading the word about your campaign and building support. And in this step, you want to invite lots of people to join in with you and to help take part in the rest of the campaign planning and implementation so that people feel like they have ownership over the project. There are lots of different ways that people can plug into the campaign, from small, easy things that people can do to help to larger roles that take on a lot more responsibility. But remember that ownership equals accountability. When we're all in it together and we all feel like it's our goal and our campaign, then we're much more likely to stay engaged and continue to help out. So now you've got a base and you've got a campaign idea. The next step that we need to talk about is tactics. And tactics should fit into your overall strategy. They should make sense to your members and supporters. Don't ever do something that your members think is crazy. Your tactics should be flexible and creative. They should have follow-up built into them. And so there should be a way, a logical progression to your tactics. And each tactic should help you build power, which means build your base, and build pressure on your decision maker to make a decision and stand in your favor. So, what are some tactic ideas? This is a pretty long list of tactic ideas, and it ranges from asking nicely, doing the educational stuff like leaflets and posters, to more creative things like banner drops or street theater, to more extreme things like sit-ins and walkouts or rallies. And so there's a whole wide range of tactic ideas out there. And when you're considering which tactics you want to choose, you want to think about who you're trying to influence and how your tactic is influencing them. What kind of power you're bringing to the table and how you're applying it. And most importantly, I think, is how does this tactic build to the next tactic? So you can see here from this, your tactics make up your overall strategy. And as you can see with the staircase here of tactics, your tactics build and build on each other to reach your goal. And so there's also, something to think about in escalating your tactics. And so you want to start off with tactics that are less escalated, like talking to folks, education things, building your base, having petitions. And then you want to increase your escalation as you go along. Make them bigger, make them more pressure, make them more visible, until you reach your goal. You also don't want to forget to timeline. Timelining is so important. It's part of that SMART goals thing that we talked about earlier. You want to have an end date in mind for your campaign, and you want to know basically how long it's going to take for you to win so that you can sort of measure yourself. And a really great way to look at timelines is to start with the end date and to plan backwards. You don't want to forget about important dates, holidays, and finals, and things like that on your timeline. And you want to try to incorporate some of those benchmarks and midterm goals so you can check your progress and evaluate your approach. Evaluation is so important. You want to make sure that you periodically throughout your campaign stop, look at how things are going, reassess the strategy or the tactics that you've chosen, and decide if you're still on the right track. Every tactic that you use is a way to build your base, invite more people to join, and to reach out to folks who've already said that they want to help and let them. One great tool for doing that is if you're going to use a petition, have a box on the petition where folks can check and say that they're interested in helping out with the campaign, and then actually call them and invite them to help out with petitioning or help out at your next event or your next tactic. Building your base is how you're bringing them in and developing new leaders on your campus or in your campaign, which is so important because we want to not only be winning our campaign and achieving that concrete victory, we want to be building new leaders, showing people that they have power, and shifting the power dynamics. So I just want to take one moment here and talk about media. In campaigns, and in successful campaigns, storytelling is so important. It's really an important thing to develop the story of your campaign because stories is how we relate to each other. And media is how we share our stories and build momentum. And so media is so important. It's an integral part of your campaign. And so I wanted to focus a little bit more on media because media is not just a tactic. It's something you should be doing throughout the entire campaign. And there's lots of different kinds of media. There's earned media where you invite a reporter to cover your story. There's blogging or writing letters to the editor, where you get your opinion piece out there onto the, into the newspaper, onto the internet. And then there's social media, like Facebook and Twitter, where we can help build our story and build our base with our peers and our friends. And like I mentioned just a few minutes ago, it's so important to evaluate your campaign. And so the next step, after you've got your strategy and your tactics, and you're using your tactics to build power and build pressure, to do some regrouping. And maybe you haven't won your campaign when you thought you would. And so during this regrouping time, it's a time for you to think about escalating your tactics. Maybe you're building more pressure. Maybe you move into some of those tactics that were listed on the list earlier that we talked about that were more escalated, like sit-ins or nonviolent direct action. Maybe this is a time for you to escalate your tactics by broadening your coalition and bringing more people in. Because remember, more people equals more people power. It's also a time for you to reevaluate the strategy, the targets, and even your goal. Maybe the goal that you chose isn't actually attainable right now. Maybe you need to reassess the goal that you've chosen and choose a goal that helps move you in the right direction, but it's a little bit easier for you to attain. And lastly, I just wanted to say here, don't get discouraged. We don't always win, and campaigns can take a long time. You're not going to win in one semester. You're not going to win in 1 year, maybe. And so remember that this is a commitment to the long haul. But when you're starting to feel discouraged, remember how much you've learned. And if you haven't won your campaign, remember that you've got all these new lessons on what you can do and maybe shouldn't do for the next time that you plan a campaign. I know personally I've learned a whole lot from campaigns that I've tried to run that weren't successful. And every time that happens, at least I know for the next time a little bit more about how to do this and be more successful. And also remember why it is that we're in this fight, why it is to you that this issue is so important and worth your time and effort. Recommit to those goals, recommit to the ideas that you're fighting for and the issues that you're fighting for, because it's important. We want to make sure also that we're working smarter and not harder. And so I just want to talk really quickly about some tips for how to work smarter and not harder. So one thing is to think about reaching a larger audience. If you've been focusing a lot on maybe canvassing, where you're out with your clipboard and you're having one-on-one conversations with folks, that's really awesome because then you get to interact with individuals, you get to learn a little bit about them, but it also takes a lot of time to have individual one-on-one conversations. So think about places where you can reach a larger audience. Maybe if you need a lot of petitions signed, you want to focus on doing class wraps or organizational wraps, where you go and you talk to an entire organization at once and you ask them all to sign your petition. Maybe you want to think about how you can tag onto other events that maybe some of your ally groups are already planning. Then you don't have to do the planning for the event, but you can sort of tag on and show up. And this is also a great way to reach a new audience that maybe you haven't reached yet. Delegation. Maybe you're in a leadership role in this campaign, but that does not mean that you have to do everything. In fact, it's a really terrible idea for you to try and do everything because, one, you're going to get burnt out and tired, and two, it doesn't help other folks realize their power and doesn't help build new leaders. So it's so important to be able to let go and let others take on ownership over your campaign or the campaign that you're working on. And leadership development. Always be teaching other people that you're working with the things that you know so that you're helping to develop them as leaders. You're also helping them to be able to take on more ownership of the campaign. We need a whole nother webinar to talk about delegation and leadership development. So here are some tips for campaign planning. keep building. Keep building your base. Every tactic is an opportunity for you to build your base, get more people plugged in, and inviting them into the campaign. Presence equals pressure. And so you want to also think about, how are we present? How are we getting ourselves out there and getting our message out there? The more that you're out there in the public eye, the more pressure that it builds. Do not forget about media. It's so important. Maybe you don't read the newspaper, but other people do. Make sure that everyone is a part of the planning and has ownership over the campaign. People are not going to want to work on your campaign. They're going to want to work on our campaign. And remember that it's hard, but it's worth it. And no one else is going to do this for us. It is literally up to us to shape the future that we want to see, and we can't rely on other people to do it for us. So, this was a really great overview of what a campaign planning strategy looks like. I wanted to now point out this awesome resource that the Midwest Academy came up with, and this is their strategy chart. And so, a really great idea would be to get together the group of folks that you work with, or build a group of folks that you want to work with around a particular issue. Maybe get together on the weekend one afternoon and sit down with this chart and fill it out. And fill it out as, detailed as you possibly can. And this chart is really, really awesome to help you walk through your goals, sort of take inventory of how much power you have in your organization, how you want to build your organization, figure out allies and decision makers, and then also walk through some tactics and start with your strategy planning. And if you choose to do this with your group on a weekend afternoon, it can lead into a weekend party, which is another really great tip, and that is that the organization or group that parties together is the organization that wins campaigns together. So I've also listed here some other resources for you. I have the KSEC Dropbox, and this is our Dropbox folder for the Kentucky Student Environmental Coalition. And in here you'll find all sorts of resources for campaigns, ideas, and campaign planning, different trainings that you have access to, as well as a whole bunch of other really cool stuff. Another thing is our Campus Campaigns Working Group. So the Kentucky Student Environmental Coalition has a Campus Campaigns Working Group. And so if you're a student and you're working on a campaign on campus, or you're interested in working on a campus campaign, this is a really cool place for you to learn and work with folks from all across the state who are interested in changing their campuses for the better. Here's a link to the Midwest Academy, where you can find some more awesome tools and resources like that strategy chart. And then here's the link to the wearepowershift.org blog. This is a blog run by the Energy Action Coalition, which is a coalition of about 30 youth environmental and environmental justice organizations. And this is a really cool place that you can go and you can write a blog, and it can be seen by folks all across the country. Next is the SEEK Organizing Manual. So the Student Environmental Action Coalition has probably the best environmental organizing manual, at least in my opinion, but I might be biased. But this is it's about 100 pages. It's short, it's really sweet and right to the point, and it's funny. You can't go wrong with this organizing manual. And this will help you not only plan campaigns, but also build organizations and, talk about leadership development and delegation and all sorts of amazing tools and ideas for organizing. And then the last thing here is a collaborative organizing social media manual. And this is really cool organizing manual that gives you all sorts of tips for using social media for your campaigns. Definitely check it out. Well, that wraps up our campaign planning webinar. I hope that you've learned something new and that you're excited to get started planning a campaign in your campus or community. Remember that if you are in Kentucky and you're interested in running an environmental campaign on your campus or in your community, you can always reach out to the Kentucky Student Environmental Coalition or me personally. My email address is ksec.kara@seek.org. Feel free to send me an email, and yeah, good luck and great day.